Hello everybody and welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be talking about the vanishing, the missing people and what might have caused their disappearance. So to set the stage, we got to talk about these buried levels once again that we can find in historic parts of certain cities. Primarily in North America. And in previous videos I've touched upon Leavenworth, Kansas, where this underground level was discovered, and it was a bit of a mystery as to when it was covered back up. A lot of unanswered questions, and just looking into some more examples of buried levels across different cities in North America, I came across Independence, Iowa, and there's even an underground city tour you can take, but they were doing some sidewalk replacement in Independence, Iowa. I think it's 2012, I believe, 11 or 12, and they came across a buried level below the current grade. And here's just a zoomed in photo of that previous image. And you can see that you have these buried windows, buried doors. And according to the narrative, the streets were raised about 6 feet in 1864. And we're generally told that the raising of the streets is to counteract frequent flooding. So that's possible, but I think what's always interesting to me, it's always like a rediscovery, and then they go back and check, and then, oh yeah, there was this project. We have no photos of it, but just trust us, it happened. And if you look up the population records for Independence, Iowa in the mid 1860s, you gotta assume it's somewhere around 2000. So it's just such a tiny town. They're raising street levels, and then everybody forgets about it. And kind of this is the story that we hear a lot, and this is just a different storefront, the Adams Family Furniture and Floor Covering Shop here. But yeah, just again, you can see what's lying 6 to 10 feet below the current grade. Now there's another example, Cambridge, Ohio. This particular building here, I think it's a Wheeling Avenue, but there's a door somewhere in this store that you can walk down into. They found some buried levels, and I believe it was rediscovered during the Wheeling Avenue construction streetscape project in 2011. Again, rediscovered, and we're told this one was buried in 1870 and again in the 40s. So interesting. Now this phenomena of buried levels, we see this all over the place, and there's a lot of good examples in Russia. This is just Omsk. There was another project. They were doing something with the streets and the sidewalks, and this is what it looked like before and after. And we're gonna zoom in here, and you're going to see a completely buried door. And again, the street level the grade would have been up here. So the magic numbers, typically amount that these levels are buried is usually about 6 to 10 feet. So depending on exactly how much, you might just see the top third of the windows, probably less than that. So why I wanted to mention that is because there's an interesting study that came out of Melbourne, actually Australia, and I came across this article talking about these buried blocks of Melbourne. So I think this all started in 2017. There were excavations being done around this on Lonsdale Street by this church, Wesley Church, in 2017. But when they were doing their excavations, they unearthed a preserved neighborhood block the size of 4 or 5 tennis courts, a few meters below the grounds of Lonsdale Street's Wesley Church. Now, these excavations have been ongoing for the last few years, and they've uncovered at least 8 different sites, but they believe there's many more. Now, this prompted a study to be done because of the sheer number of finds they were coming across. And the name of the study is Heritage in Ruins, an investigation into Melbourne's buried blocks. And I'm just going to highlight these 2 points because this just pretty much sums it up. So the study basically reveals details of a forgotten campaign throughout the 1850s and 1860s. Again, this stuff always catches people by surprise. They gotta look back, and it's always forgotten, right? And it's usually in this time frame. But this is great. However, the bombshell in the study was its discovery of a law passed in 1853 requiring those in low-lying areas to bury their homes. And if a landowner refused or was too slow, the council was empowered to raise the level of the land itself and charge the costs. So we're told that there was just this law passed, and we're told these homeowners had to raise the level themselves. And I do find it interesting that all of these raising of street levels seem to be happening roughly mid-1800s in different countries, different parts of the world. And where this whole story takes a really interesting turn for me is with all of the artifacts they're finding at these various sites. And I think over the course of a few years, amongst these different sites, they've found so far over 100,000 artifacts. And on top of that, these artifacts, they find them beneath a layer of clay, which is interesting to me. But these artifacts, they're not just like broken bottles and ceramics. There are coins, things that have value, personal items, things that you would take with you if you were forced to leave your residence. There are things that you would take with you, but it almost looked like these people were in a rush to get out of wherever they were, and they didn't even have time to take the necessities. To me, this tells a different story than just like they were ordered to leave, and if they were a little too slow, the council would just sort of come in with the clay and just bury their homes. It just doesn't seem like that's the case to me. So I think we're dealing with a different group of people that experienced what we refer to as the mud flood. And I think there are some indicators that we could point to, but I think this is that same phenomena that we see in Russia and the United States, but we're just told the cause of this is they're raising street levels in the United States, or in Russia sometimes there's no excuse given, but I think it's all the same phenomena. Now, are there any other indicators that might point to this idea that we're looking at a different group of people? And I think there is. When you start looking into the mid-1800s and going forward, we have the whole phenomena of foundlings and orphans, and we've got the orphan trains and orphanages, and we've got the workhouses for children, and we have children in factories, and a lot of these children, we can't document their pasts, so we don't know their origins, and this went on for decades, so we could have a whole different group of people for all we know. I think that's one indicator, and another good indicator, I think, is the use of this natural cement in the 17 and 1800s, according to our official history. So a lot of the buildings that we see that date to the 1800s in Europe, for instance, the facades on these structures, as well as some of the cast ornaments and the architectural sculptures, a lot of these things were crafted using this natural cement referred to as Roman cement, not to be confused with the Roman concrete associated with the Roman Empire. This is more recent, but even though you have all these structures that employed this Roman cement, they had to, in the 2000s, there was a couple projects carried out by the European Union to rediscover the technology. So this technology from the 1800s, it was lost and had to be rediscovered. And by itself, maybe you could explain that away, but when you look in the United States, they were using a natural cement as well in the 1800s. And again, Portland cement is like the sort of the worldwide standard, but prior to 1880s, the United States wasn't even producing Portland cement, so they would have been importing it. But as far as producing their own cement, we're told anyway, they were using this natural cement, a lot of it coming from Rosendale in New York. Now, there was this restoration project on this Fort Jefferson, which is in the middle of nowhere with 16 million bricks, and they finally came to the realization that the mortar that was holding these bricks together, it wasn't a lime-based mortar, it was this natural cement. So they had to recreate this natural cement. They had to recreate this Rosendale cement because they wanted to use the same building materials. But on top of that, people who do historical restorations, they weren't even aware that this natural cement was being used, this Rosendale cement. They thought it was like a lime-based mortar. Even the knowledge of it was lost. I don't know, it's just too much for me to think that's all coincidental. So I think the loss of technologies and just a lot of children speak to a different group, in my view. Now, what else I wanted to hit on is this phenomena called mudlarking. And a mudlark is just someone who scavenges in river mud for items of value. And especially like the River Thames in the UK, there's like countless YouTube channels. People just go and looking for artifacts, and they'll pull out all sorts of interesting things. Most of it dating to the 1800s, 1700s, and just in light of everything we're kind of looking at, I think some of these artifacts could be older, even though they look like things from the 1800s. I think some of these artifacts could be older, but this is just an article. Yeah, clay pipes are commonly found, and I found another article talking about some of the common things that are found: pottery sherds, chalk, flint, green stones, apparently, that archaeologists are not entirely sure of what they are. Old bricks dumped into the Thames and worn down by time. So just a ton of artifacts, and I just wanted to mention it because I'm sure people in the UK are very familiar with this, but North American and audience might not be as versed. And even in Australia, there are people who engage in this, and they can pull out all kinds of artifacts. But we're told people in the past just dumped everything into the river. It was a major dumping ground, and I believe that, but that might not be the entire truth, because maybe some of these things are buried due to an event, and that's sort of my speculation. Now, I just found another article talking about a kiln was found. It was unearthed under a Montreal bridge that fired millions of clay pipes. So it's just an interesting phenomena, and I just wanted to mention it here. And I think that's it for today. So until next time, take care. Bye.